I totally underestimated this new album, The Thief Next to Jesus by Ka. I read the title, I saw the cover, and I basically figured, yeah, no, this sounds interesting. This sounds pretty deep, but I think I've got it. And then, for some reason, I don't usually read Pitchfork, but I read their review as well, and they basically confirmed what I thought, which was this was going to be, a pretty deep album about the relationship between the Christian church and black Americans and the history of oppression and religion as a tool of oppression, in particular Christianity as a tool of oppression against black Americans going back to slavery. And that's a deep thought. That's great. But that's shallow compared to what we actually get. This album is actually way deeper and more interesting than that premise, which is in and of itself a novel and interesting premise. But let's first address that, because it is about that to a certain degree. It is a degree about the coercion, because that's the thing is, religion is not spread because it's true. Religion is spread because people are coerced. Now they can be incentivized or they can be punished. It can be the carrot or it can be the stick. But in general, faith is spread by silver and by the sword. Take my last name, Paine. Okay, Paine. It doesn't mean ouch. It actually goes back to an old French word, païen, which is the same word that makes the word pagan or pagano in other languages. Now, when you hear the word pagan, you think, oh, that means somebody who's like kind of evil. What it really means is somebody who isn't Christian. What it really means is farmer. That's why like a paisano is somebody who lives out on the farm. It's the same root of that word. Pain just means hick. My last name means some dumb hick out in who's farming. And the reason that pagans are called pagans is because they were so far away from Rome. They were so far away from the center of Christianity that they just didn't know about Jesus. They hadn't been told. So some armies had to come out and tell them all about this great news. So at some point, a couple centuries ago, my farming-ass ancestors were sitting there and someone showed up with either a bag of gold or a sword and said, hey, this is Jesus, he's your savior, and whoever it was in my ancestry stopped worshiping rocks in the middle of a field and decided to worship a guy with a crown of thorns, okay? That's how religion spreads. Now, obviously, the specific case of black Americans is a lot more recent, and it's a lot more visceral, where you have, and in particular, I'm speaking of foundational black Americans, the ancestors of people who were enslaved, okay? They had a very specific case, obviously, coming from Western Africa, mostly Western Africa, of a whole bunch of different religions and all just being thrown together. Now, I'm not going to go over the entire history of how black Americans were converted to Christianity over the centuries. For that, I recommend a book called The Talking Book, African Americans and the Bible by Dwight Callahan. I'm just going to read a little section from an interview that he gave with NPR, which is pretty interesting. I live in Rochester, which is where Frederick Douglass was from, the great abolitionist, the freed enslaved person who went on to become a voice against slavery, and who is the name of our airport. You fly to visit me, you have to go to Frederick Douglass Airport. Can't be proud of everything. So what's fascinating is that Frederick Douglass, even though he was a spiritual man himself, was against sending Bibles to the South, was against sending Bibles to the enslaved people, despite the fact that he rose up out of ignorance, rose up out of forced ignorance, right? Rose up out of being illiterate and became this great speaker. He did not want to share this vital tool of literacy, and to some people's mind, this tool of liberation. This is what Dwight Callahan says. So for the slave-holding class, the Bible was very important for them as a warrant for what they understood to be the right to own slaves to own people. And they preached it that way. The Bible says that they were to be slaves, they were to be obedient slaves. That was God's will. Frederick Douglass understood. I would argue that Ka understands that this book, for all of its greatness, like any other book, can be easily interpreted and misinterpreted and focused into this way. He continues, and there are passages in the Bible that suggest that. And he heard those passages, Frederick Douglass did, slaves be obedient to your masters, and he knew that those are the passages that the slaves in the South would hear over and over again. And so he thought it would be better for them not to have that book at all. That's, a little bit of how old this whole debate is. There's also a great documentary on PBS called Slavery in the Making of America. It's a pretty good sort of overview. I just assumed that the second that people arrived in America that they were forced to convert, but that wasn't really the case. Apparently by 1800, it wasn't even a majority of enslaved Africans who had converted to Christianity. Sometimes they were incentivized, if they went to Florida, and they were, if they broke free of their plantation and went to Florida, they would be treated as free by the Spaniards who were colonizing Florida at the time. Kind of interesting. There is a lot of freedom in the Bible. Right? There's a lot of preaching about freedom and being free, which is why that same book that can be used to tell you to be an obedient slave can also tell you to fight for your own liberation. So that's why in 1667 there was a law that was passed saying that conversion did not mean freedom. I'll talk more about that because Skye talks about that. Sometimes church organizations were against slavery. Often they were the very front of the abolitionist movements. But then other times, Christian preachers, Protestant preachers, would be very much for it in this concept of what one might call Christian hierarchy. Sometimes churches were banned in the South, sometimes they were not. But the main thing that we can all agree on is after the war, there was a huge centralization of Black American culture, especially in the South, around the church as a place to bring hope and beauty and joy in some sense of salvation. So if the album were exclusively about that, if we were to give that reading, already it's fascinating, already it's deep, already it's important. But I don't think that does it justice. I don't think that is actually how deep this album goes. I think it's more the impossibility or the folly of having faith while living in a white supremacist and hyper-capitalist society. I think that's what this is about. I don't think it's necessarily about Christianity itself, because the problem with Christianity is not Christianity. It's Christians. It's people. It's human beings. They're the problem, because they're always going to act in their own best interest. They're always going to default into some kind of oppressed and oppressor relationship. And I think in some ways you could read this as a deeply Christian album, but a specific kind of Christian album that understands something that I believe, or puts forth something that I personally believe, which is that the values of Jesus Christ are at odds with extreme free market capitalism. You can't hold those two things together, okay? Like they're opposite. I believe in Jesus. I believe in free market capitalism. Those things, depending on how you read the Bible, depending on how you interpret it, they're incongruent. And I think that's part of what this album is about as well, although it is certainly not explicitly, socialist or anything like that. So let's get to why this album, what makes this album deeper. Well, let's go to the title. That's called a definite article, kids, if you're wondering about grammar. The is a definite article. N is an indefinite article. The is a definite article. Thief, next to Jesus. The plural of thief is thieves. There were 2 thieves next to Jesus. When an artist tells you the thief next to Jesus, when the artist tells you something singular that is plural, then you have to understand they are talking about the ambiguity between them. That's why I made this meme on Instagram. I thought I was cute and funny. I compared it to The Life of Pablo by Kanye West, because Kanye West, in his 2016 album, said it was about being Pablo Escobar or about being Pablo Picasso. This album, I believe, is about whether or not you are the impenitent thief or the penitent thief. Don't worry, I'm going to explain those in some great detail. Yes, it's Theology Day on the old Kashyyyk Studios. Those are cicadas or something. Good atmosphere. So I'm going to read to you, there's 3 different retellings of this story in the Bible. Each gospel tells basically the same story with some variations. I think the version in Luke is most interesting. And yes, I read them all. I got fascinated. I've spent a lot of time thinking about the thieves next to Jesus, trying to figure out which thief is Skye asking us to consider. So it's from Luke 22:39 to 23:43. So this is Jesus. He's on the cross. Okay. Now, one of the criminals hanging there reviled Jesus, saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." Sidebar. So everyone's laughing at Jesus, right? All the people are laughing and pointing at Jesus as he's up there, saying, "Oh, save yourself." And now the thief, the person who we will call the bad thief, the impenitent thief, says, "Save yourself and us." And then, line 40, the other thief, rebuking him, said in reply, "Have you no fear of God? For you are subject to the same condemnation." Okay, so now we have the good thief on the other side. And the good thief on the other side is like, he's here with us. Now, this is an interesting moment. And if the story ended here, it'd be very different, because it'd be a question of solidarity, of being treated unjustly in an unjust society. But that's not what happens. What does the good thief say? "And indeed, we have been condemned justly. For the sentence we received corresponds to our crimes, but this man has done nothing criminal." This is the central point, as far as I can tell, is this line right here. This is the key to understanding this album. The complexity of this verse is the man who is being murdered for stealing something is saying, "I have been condemned, we have been condemned justly, but Jesus is innocent." Then he said to Jesus, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied to him, "Amen, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Let me give you a little image of sort of what that looks like in popular culture or in art, in history of art. This is Andreas Pavias from around 1440, a great Greek artist. And so, we see there's the good thief over there, and there's the bad thief, and you actually see like Satan coming down and like poking around at his eyes. Sometimes when the story is depicted, you will see like a crow perch on top of the bad thief and poke out his eyes. But this is the basic idea. Of course, the good one is to the right and the bad one is to the left, because the Bible is fairly ableist in terms of leftness and rightness. I don't know if it's ableism. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of a strange thing. So these are the two thieves. This is the story. So when he says the thief next to Jesus, we have to say which one. The penitent, the good thief, or the impenitent one? The moral of the story, ostensibly, okay, I've also listened to a lot of different Christian thinkers talk about this, and the positive moral that you're supposed to draw from the story as a Christian is that no matter what you've done, Jesus will always save you. And even if you're a criminal and you're right there, and even if, and in some versions of the story, the good thief initially joins in and makes fun of Jesus, and then he changes his mind, that like Jesus will save you at any point, and as long as you understand his beauty and wisdom and the truth of the light of the God of the Word, etc., then you will be free. Fine, that's a fairly interesting message, but what is it really, though? Like, what is it really saying? That the bad thief. Now, in around 500 AD, a guy named Nicodemus, a Christian writer, named these guys. So I'm also going to throw their names in just so you have them. So there's Gestas, who's the bad thief, the one who mocks Jesus in the crowd, and then the good thief, Dismas, who's now actually called Saint Dismas. Dismas, the good thief, implies or says directly that they agree to be punished. And how far away is that sentiment, that we deserve to be here? How far away is that from a book that says that we are to be good, obedient slaves? Was Dismas right? Was the good thief right? Or is the whole system completely screwed up? Is the whole system completely faulty? Is Dismas, the good thief, completely wrong? Nobody should be tortured to death, period. But a thief? What does a thief imply? A thief implies that someone didn't have something and he took it. Understanding that this album is made in the context of the post-Reagan world, the post-widening wealth gap, that it comes from an artist who grew up in Brownsville, who grew up in poverty, an album that's obsessed with poverty, a poverty which is the result of cycles of poverty, enforced poverty, going back to slavery, through Jim Crow, through segregation, through the wealth gap, all of these questions. That means that if you don't have enough to live and you steal, you deserve to be tortured to death. That's the message. So, when he titles the album, The Thief Next to Jesus, which one? I think the album is about both. I think it's about Gestas, and I think it's about Dismas, and I think it's how they're both wrong. And no matter how you react to inequality, no matter how you react to injustice in this hyper-capitalist, unfair white supremacist world, you're still going to be tortured to death. And the man in the middle won't save you. Unless you believe that he will save you once you're dead, in which case, great. By the way, just a little caveat, I am Christian. I believe in Christianity, all that. I believe in the saving power of Christ, so I might sound very critical here, but, I'm dealing with the complexity of this faith that I believe in. Because if the kingdom of heaven requires hell on earth, how do you accept that as somebody who is on earth? And let's think about this. Right, let's think about this analogy and take it out. If we are to say that people who are victims of an unjust society, okay, let's say, Black Americans forced into cyclical poverty, abandoned, misused, oppressed, etc. What are their two options in this little parable? Well, they can be the good thief or the bad thief. Now, what's the bad thief? The bad thief is the thug archetype, the gangster, the criminal, the person who sneers at God and sneers at society and sneers at religion and just takes everything and just throws up the double birds and goes off, and that's his life, and probably spends the rest of his life in jail. That's the bad thief. So what the Bible preaches is that we are to be like Saint Dismas, like the good thief. We, or they, are supposed to love Jesus, and most importantly, acknowledge the justness of their treatment. The message, interpreted through this, is that Black Americans deserve the poverty and misery that they live in. And the only way to feel better, the only way to understand or to mediate that misery, is to see it as their divine duty. To sit there on the cross and say, we deserve this. He doesn't. Praise Jesus. How different is that than be an obedient and good slave? In both cases, they're never actually, they're the people next to Jesus. It's not about their salvation. Like, the best they can hope for is to be tortured to death. Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show, hosted by a French professor who hears some kind of frog back there. I have to record outside now because I just got too many kids in my household, and I have to record in the morning because I'm just too damn busy. So I hope you enjoy the atmosphere, the ambiance. Sometimes some deer walk behind me, so keep an eye out for that, okay? You don't get that in a green screen. So, I bought the album. First of all, one thing I like about Skye is that he forces you to buy his music. Okay, you can listen to it illegally on certain YouTube websites. But, you have to buy the MP3 files. I like the way that he values his art, and that's what I did. I bought it for $20. And before I get back to this very kind of unsettling theme of Dismas and Gestas, or however you pronounce it, the good thief and the bad thief, I just want to say it's a really enjoyable album. It's a very nice album to listen to. The only problem I have with buying music digitally for $20 is I would rather buy it physically for $100. You know what I mean? Because I just don't listen to MP3 files very often. So that's my only complaint. It's a weak-ass complaint. But basically, this album is the same thing over and over again. It's got the same rough format. Now, this rough format is interesting. It's fairly okay, so first of all, if you don't know, he writes and produces everything. So he just hangs out. He's a fireman by day, fights fire, goes home, I guess, and then just sits there with his Pro Tools and just makes all this great music. Every song starts with some kind of intro, which is a sample, which discusses questions of the history of Black Americans and Christianity. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative, always insightful. Then, or simultaneously, the sample comes in. The sample is something gospel-y, or maybe religious-y, some kind of church music. It's often quite stilted. It sounds most often like either an intro or an interlude or an outro, kind of sampled and like repeated in sort of a stilted way. That then leads into a just killer verse with his very understated. I compared him to Robert De Niro just because I just his the way he presents himself reminds me a lot of like early era Robert De Niro. I don't know, just sort of his cool laconic style. And again, the more you study it, the more details pop up. Just the absolute skill of his rhyming. And then there's some kind of chorus or some kind of hook, which is the real center of the song. That's like the real message. That's the real thesis. He's a good communicator. So the Cardinals are way too intense over there. I'm also sitting right next to the bird feeder, so they're just waiting for me to leave. They're getting all sorts of upset. So, he has the killer verse and then the chorus, and he's a smart guy because he knows that his verses are very dense. People aren't going to parse out all the lyrics. Even if you go to Lyric Genius, most of the lyrics there are just wrong because people can't figure out what he's saying because they don't really understand the level at which he's rapping. Thank you for trying, whoever it is that did it. But then the chorus is usually just a very straightforward idea, and then another verse, and then an outro that's just like the intro, another kind of quote, another passage that pertains to blackness and Christianity. That over and over and over again for 15 tracks, 14 tracks, and it's just great the whole way through. It creates this kind of atmosphere where you just want to live in that place. Okay, I now see. So those are tufted titmice, and they are fighting over something. I'm just going to let it ride. Apparently people only mind the bird sounds when I draw attention to them. Smash like bucket. Put an AVAA in the comments if you want to get a like from me, because I really appreciate that. And also, I don't do advertisements, so I just want to promote another channel. It's called That Dope Shit. The I is like an exclamation point. I'll include a link in the description. He's doing a lot of good work on underground rappers, and he has a great sort of biography of Ka, sort of biography and discography. If you're not really down with Ka, or you don't really know Ka, check out his video because it's super good. Okay, so let me give you an example song, Lord Have Mercy. Click above the mist. I feel like I'm in Unsolved Mysteries. For the song Lord Have Mercy, which is in the middle of the album. I think it's a perfect example of what this album is. We have a little quote at the beginning. I'd like to take this time to sing one of the old hymns for you. Some random sample from some random gospel album somewhere. This happens to have the absolute most killer beat on the album. This beat is just so good. It's like this lilting piano, this kind of catchy melody, but then there's this sample of this unsettling ooh. There's the piano stuff. It's just, oh my God, this song. He has this way, because his style is so muted, and even his production style is so muted, that you can hear it and not really hear it. But then when you really listen, it's so satisfying. And then he has a beautiful verse and then gets to the thesis. The thirsty saying, Lord have mercy, is all I survey. So he's taking the expression, Lord have mercy. And often people just say, oh, Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. This is the idea. The thirsty saying, the thirsty being the forsaken people, anybody who lives in injustice and in poverty. In this case, I believe he is discussing the plight of Black Americans, especially in urban centers of concentrated poverty. Okay, deliberately concentrated poverty, deliberately created and sustained by the American government, or permitted to exist by the American government for 100 years. Okay, the thirsty saying, Lord have mercy, is all I survey. So he looks out, and what does he see when he looks out? He doesn't see a check cashing place next to a liquor store, next to a church. He doesn't see I don't know, gangsters on the corner. He doesn't see someone walking to work trying to do their best. He doesn't see... All of it is the thirsty saying, Lord, have mercy. People, like literally dying of thirst. And that's all that he sees. At the end of the verse, he has one of his beautiful lines, and we need real freedom. Stop believing in this falsehood. This is why I think the album is so interesting. Because you could take this purely as a critique on the freedom of Christianity and the freedom gospel that can be seen as a load of bunk, okay, that is being sold to black Americans to keep them docile and have them worshiping a system that keeps them down. But I think actually the freedom that he's talking about is actually the freedom that comes with money, the freedom that comes with believing in free market capitalism and the ability to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps and make it into the higher levels of society. Like this falsehood, the real freedom that he's talking about is not economic. It's like justice, and it's this falsehood that imposes the inequality, that imposes the lack of freedom through an economic system that is supported by white supremacist policy. And then the outro is just great. This piano, it's so nice and so good. I love the way he kind of does a jerky intro into his verses too. Like the chorus will be kind of smooth, and then it's okay, going to go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker, but I don't know how long this video is going to be. I honestly didn't know I was going to be talking about the good thief and the bad thief for so long, but what are you going to do? Opens up with the track Bread, Wine, Blood, Body. Yeah, I believe that's a reference to transubstantiation. That is the belief that when you drink from the communion, you're actually drinking his blood. When you eat the little wafer, you're actually eating Christ's body. And when I first heard this, I was really annoyed, because I was getting ready for that kind of thin, the shallow deepness, right? Like I was getting ready for the album that was an attack on Christianity's hold over black America, right? And the whole verse, the whole song is about like how lame gangster rappers are and flossing rappers are. That's how a lame floss till the brain loss from the growing plaque. You say it's safe and play the eighth, can't replace what your soul lack. It goes on and on attacking, it's drugs this, money that, guns that. And I'm like, am I just here to hear some preachy song about how, like, stop rapping about crime and start rapping about the inequality? I mean, that's fine, but that's not what's promised to me to the theme. Don't be the weapon they use to harm you. Okay, I do like how it got a lot deeper at the very, very end. A true revolutionary sentiment. FBI and Klan killed your leaders. When y'all gone? When are y'all going to pay him back? That's how we move. Then I'm smooth. Y'all can stay intact, right? So saying we're just going to let the FBI and the Klan kill all the black leaders and not do anything. We're not going to pay him back. If you're going to do that, I'm not going to participate. An album almost as revolutionary as LL Cool J. Did you see my review of the new LL Cool J album? Maybe you think you know LL Cool J. I don't think you do. Dude went really militant on his last album. It's very good. So, I thought this song was just about rappers being bad, and it's not. It's about justice. It's about the bad thief. It's a portrait of the thief next to Jesus. It's a portrait of the bad thief next to Jesus, who is being the tool that they use to oppress you. He's giving into the system. He's giving them reason to treat them like that. Okay, now I'm getting it. Now I'm getting this. Because either you fight against the system and die, or you support the system and die. There has to be a third way, and that's the way that Ka is trying to present himself as being the critical revolutionary force, the one that's not getting crucified to death. Amazing outro here, another quote. If you listen to what black people are singing religiously, it is a clue as to what is happening to them sociologically. Our music mirrors what is happening to us. Let us not forget, if it were not for the black church, all this great music that we're talking about on this channel would not exist, okay? Okay, I talked about Bach once. Okay, so that's the one piece of music that would exist without black spirituals. Everything else I've reviewed, the 1,000, whatever, 900, 400 videos, I don't know how many I've done at this point. All those videos, they wouldn't have been done. So let's just understand that it's also this important thing where Christian music, Christian themes all those things reflect the way that Black Americans would use Christianity as themes to sing about. They would inevitably be things that were reflecting the life that they were living, which means that the same thing that's happening where it's singing about, I don't know, Moses was in Egypt land, let my people go. I don't know if that's the exact word. I apologize. I wasn't anticipating. I would have looked up the quote if I knew I was going to do this. I don't sing spirituals. Singing about let my people go and having it relate to Moses reflects where they are now, in the same way that when the Migos sing trapping out the bands with the bars on the windows, right? The same way that is a clue to what's happening to them sociologically. And this song against rappers rapping about trapping is also reflecting what is happening sociologically. This is all a religious question around what is happening sociologically. The next song is beautiful, and it does this thing where everything ends with beautiful, and then there's like the kind of the rapping thing, and then the sample comes back and it's beautiful, and you get stuck in this little waltz because you just want to keep saying beautiful. And it's a beautiful little message here. May you live a long life, nice long life. I hope it's beautiful. It's a fascinating usage of the sample. I gotta stop, but that's the way that's used. Beautiful, over and over again. It's great because it does a thing where it actually gets me into the spirit. Like, I tried to find this original gospel song. I couldn't find it. I have a colleague who's an expert in gospel, but I didn't see him until yesterday, so I didn't have time to ask him about this. But, what's that gospel song that goes beautiful? I think there's probably a lot of them. But it's this great kind of smoky waltz. Give back to the poor, that's what you call beautiful. When I part, pray they grieve. Pray the mark I leave is beautiful. Can't end quick, treasure friendship because it's beautiful. It's all about the things that are actually beautiful in life. And it's not some blonde-haired, blue-eyed dude who's been staked to a bunch of lumber. It's the way that we can treat each other. It's giving back to the poor. It's caring for people. It's friendship. It's the things that actually matter. And then the sample plays out, and it's just great. Then tested testimony, more, it's all the stuff between. Ooh, it's going to rain here. You're going to get some real fascinating audio here, because it's a covered porch. The fascinating thing here, it starts off with a quote from what sounds like a historian, not a preacher. Quote, "The Virginia Assembly in 1664 decreed that it was indeed possible for Africans to be both enslaved and Christians." This is the problem. Christianity was used in service of the slave trade. It just was. Or it was the cognitive dissonance between those things was allowed to exist. Montesquieu, the great French philosopher, wrote this great tract all about slavery, saying how enslaved people can't be humans because if they were, then that would mean that we ourselves are not Christian. That's the way that he attacked. That's the way he put forth a kind of abolitionist philosophical thing, basically using satire, being like, of course they're not human beings, because if they were, then we wouldn't be Christians. Oh, what's that? You're going to baptize them? Which just brings me to one of my favorite weird things to describe this time in history. Louis XIV made a lot of money off of the slave trade. France made a lot of money off the slave trade. As I always say, if you go to Versailles, it's a beautiful place. Just imagine it drenched in blood, okay? Because that's where it all comes from. And they created a code called the Code Noir, the Black Code, where they codified everything. To a certain extent, it was positive because it protected, it made sure that when enslaved people were free, that they were considered citizens, made sure that they were taken care of when they were unwell. It built in a lot of these protections for them. It even gave them Sunday off. So a lot of the enslaved people in the French colonies would go off on Sunday and make music, and that's why jazz came out of New Orleans and didn't come out of Mississippi. Okay, so anyways, that's one of my little jokes. Louis XIV accidentally helped create jazz. But in that document, it goes into great detail about how all these enslaved people, must be baptized. They must be baptized. All French enslaved people were baptized Christian. That was forced on them. Later on in the document, it says all enslaved people should be treated as though they were meubles, furniture, which creates, and I want to thank my friend Pierre for for writing this sentence the way he wrote it, a slave is Catholic furniture. That's what they are. It's a chair with a soul. That cognitive dissonance, that is where, when free market capitalism comes up against the values of Christianity, you have that cognitive dissonance. And if you're not pointing out that cognitive dissonance, if you're not constantly saying a human being cannot be a Catholic chair, that cannot be. If you're not pointing that out, then you are supporting those systems. And that's what the good thief did. The good thief supported the system. He didn't deserve it. We do. The snares come in. The way he starts rapping, it's almost like by mistake. He's rapping about getting older, aches and pains, breaks and stains. Things I once did with ease ain't the same. And then we get to this great collectivist message of the chorus. You can't afford to have one wasted or fall through, because if one make it, we all do. It's this sort of dream, this kind of fantasy that he has of how life could be if we were a collectivist society as opposed to individualistic society. Thoughts that mustered like a mustard seed. So he's also showing that he actually, knows the Bible. He's quoting the Bible. If you don't know the parable of the mustard seed, it's where faith is described as like a mustard seed. I'll quote from Luke again. The kingdom of heaven. That's the term. The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed, which a man took and put in his own garden. It grew and became a large tree, and the birds of the sky lodged in its branches. So a little tiny bit of faith, a little tiny mustard seed, just the most little tiny thing, little mali kikiriki, can just be grown into a gigantic tree. Ka continues, 100 among you struggle with less than greed. Agreed, when you give much, much is received. If you ain't living life in Christ, I ain't trust the need. Complex here, because he seems to, again, I think, be generally in favor of some of the teachings of Christ while being against the people who teach the teachings of Christ. Whew. And then at the end, we have another one of these important quotes. This album feels like it's sort of an excuse, not an excuse, but he's really trying to put these quotes front and center. How did the African soul survive this dark day? By the power of spirituality. Everybody talking about heaven ain't going in, you see, because they would say, how can you believe in God and do this to me? Borrowed Time starts with a smoky organ sound, faraway guitar, just an amazing sample. Really, really hard opening verse. And to me, what I hear, damn, I don't hear a strand of wisdom. It's smart. It's smart. What they bark ain't art. It's vandalism. The pre-gun lands. We brung hands. It's ammunition. I plan my death before I plan submission. I think this is a reaction to both thieves next to Jesus. What they bark ain't art. It's vandalism. So I think he's saying, I don't know, when some rapper raps about trapping, it's not art, it's vandalism. But also, it's, I think, hearing this whole sermon, this whole parable of the good thief saying that we deserve this. I don't hear a strand of wisdom. There is no wisdom in this parable. I plan my death before I plan submission. He's planning to die before he submits to this unjust place that tells him he deserves to be tortured to death. That's the thing about crucifixion. It's being tortured to death. We don't call it that because crucifixion's a cool word, but it is literally being tortured to death. And just, he's, every once in a while he'll just flex off some of these really rich rhymes. This is mastery, almost at capacity. They God's name in vain, don't blame me if they can't blaspheme. Of course, them thugs are who I love and never ask to fee. Must have missed some vicious pictures in this tapestry. More unfairness, more of this questioning religion as it is used to divide. Then we get to the collection plate, which opens with the question, why are we amongst the most praising people, but we seem to be on the bottom of so many areas of society? No beat, just this organ rising up and the sound of, yeah, Lord, and then, well, the way he uses these samples is fascinating. And we get to a couple things. One, we have the theology of free market capitalism in the middle of this track. Worst happens to the best, never test. The hood is fair. The hood is fair. The idea that the hood, the ghetto, the urban center of concentrated poverty is fair, because in that space everybody essentially is reduced to living in a very sort of black and white existence of kill or be killed, get what you can, don't get what you can. But of course the truth is the existence of that concentrated poverty is in and of itself unfair. So I think he's speaking ironically there. And then we get to the chorus, if you really wanted to bless me, you would have left me that collection plate. You can't access spiritual salvation or feel any freedom from that when you're living in a system that deprives you of any kind of material comfort. That's what it is. You know, why is the free lunch program so important? Because hungry kids can't learn. Hungry kids can't really believe in God either. I mean, I guess they can, but like, you've got to stop being hungry, you know? We got to stop letting people be hungry. Broken Rose Window, the church participated vigorously in the Underground Railroad, which is true. That goes back to that sort of central dilemma that I was saying in the beginning, how the church can be used for and against slavery. This must be an Al Green sample, I don't know. But this is just, again, about the inability to afford things. How I wore these mismatched socks, still avoid chocolate sprinkles, looks too similar to what the rat drops. So, like, when he's eating ice cream, a source of joy, he doesn't eat the sprinkles because it looks like rat shit. Which it does. And as adamant was never having it, we the have-nots. Okay, it turns out this video is going to be over 40 minutes long. I thought it might be under 30. But what am I supposed to do? It's ka. Or as people in Boston call, car. The have-nots is actually from the Bible. There's the haves and the have-nots. I quote from Mark 4:25. He who has, to him will be given. And he who has not, from him will be taken ever that which he has. Meaning, if you have something, you'll get more. If you have less, that will be taken away from you. Now, this is in reference to faith and belief. So that's great. You know, if you have a little bit of faith, you know, like you have to grow your faith. But read through the prosperity gospel, read through the way that our capitalist society works, that's actually how it is, right? It costs more money to be poor than it does to be rich. Okay? This is, you know, I'm not rich, but I'm very, you know, I have a good job. I'm a very lucky guy, right? Like, you know, this is a good sweatshirt and this will last me 10 years. It cost, I don't know. Oh, actually, this one was, well, you know, it cost me $50. I could have bought one for $20 that would last me 1 year. So I can either buy one sweatshirt every year for $20 and spend $100 to have a sweatshirt for 5 years, or just buy one. It's cheaper to be rich than it is to be poor. And the more you have, the less gets taken from you. The easier it is to avoid paying taxes. The more you have, the less is taken from you. That is the free market capitalistic system that we have all signed on to and all agree to. That is the nature of the tax cuts. That is the nature of our entire society. He who has, to him will be given, and he who has not, from him will be taken ever that which he has. So the Bible is not explicitly supporting this kind of wealth gap, but it certainly sounds like it, because the have-nots keep losing. At the end, I could have prayed the other day, but we ain't have no food in the house. How are you supposed to pray when you're hungry? You cannot live on communion wafers alone. We get to the song God Undefeated. More stilted gospel sounds starting and restarting. It's really sad to think that you cannot live without believing in God, especially black people, starts off. And then we get to the chorus. Indeed, a believer survived to the finish. God sides with the winners. It's connected to the last song. It's connected to the last song. The last song, which was all about how he who has will get more and he who has not will get less, because God sides with the winners. What a terrible thing to say. Especially when we think about that, you know, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' greatest hit, okay? Okay, Jesus' Wonderwall, okay, was the Sermon on the Mount. The meek inherit the earth, and the whole thing about like you can't. You can't, he has a whole bunch of stuff about how you should not be too rich and you should not have too many worldly goods. But God sides with the winners. The preachings of Jesus are not in line. There's a great line from the Divine Comedy. It's a British singer. And he has this line that's always stuck in my head. The cars in the churchyard are shiny and German, strictly at odds with the words of the sermon. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what this is too. Soul and spirit. This is great. This is, oh my God. Oh my God. Oh. You know what else I think of when I think of the name Ka? I think of Street Fighter 2, where you beat up the car and then the guy shows up, but the sound is a little bit wonky. The guy just, oh my Ka. Every time I think of Ka, I just, oh my Ka. And of course the Egyptian god too. Anyways, so the intro has, the rhythm of the beat is secondary. What has made gospel live is the message that the rhythm and the beat carry. And that's what's fascinating. What makes religious music so important? Is it the fact that it is the basis of all music that we listen to today? Or is it the fact that it's carrying the message of God? This album by Ka, the rhythm and the beat is secondary. What made The Thief Next to Jesus so powerful is the message that the rhythm and the beat carry. I don't edit my videos. If I could, I would do that meme of the guy going, oh, just because it's awesome. That's awesome what he's doing. He's working on so many different levels. More uplifting beat here, piano and organ. We may be equal, but we're not the same. To absorb loss, there's a lot to gain. More about this inequality. This album really is about inequality and accepting the inequality of our civilization. Then we have The Stamp, Lord Have Mercy, then Such Devotion, more gospel sounds. We have a whole quote here from Nebraska Senator Ernie Chambers. Thank you to Lyric Genius for finding this. We're not going to suffer patiently. We're no more turning the other cheek, no more blessing our enemies. This is a fairly familiar thing about the problem with nonviolence, is when you turn the cheek, you just keep getting your face slapped. What are you supposed to do? When you're broke, crushing coke don't take much coaxing. Cooking the raw is a foot in the door, trying to bust it open, but dudes ain't making moves. Our view is just commotion. To succeed, you've never seen such devotion. So this is the prosperity gospel. This is the concept that, like, people... Because don't forget, the thieves next to Jesus were arrested on drug charges. This isn't really known. This is also Nicodemus, okay? So the thieves next to Jesus were born in a part of Jerusalem that for a couple centuries had been really disparaged, and there's very little ways to make it out because they were in a class of society. Their ears, the earlobes, were connected as opposed to being separated, so that prevented them from having access to education or banking or loans or property, any of that stuff. So they actually... The only thing they could really do was figure out a way to make money, and the way to make money was to sell cocaine, which definitely existed back in the olden days, to sell cocaine to other people. So these thieves are actually crack dealers because, when you're broke, crushing coke don't take much coaxing. It was a way to get a foot in the door and a way to get out there. And so the one of them sitting there and saying, yeah, Jesus, thug life, and then on the other side, we got the one saying, no, but we deserve it. We deserve the criminal justice system. We deserve it. We deserve this insane, borderline... Okay, I'm not going to get too political. But I'm not going to get too political. Read Angela Davis, okay? Our prison's obsolete. This borderline segregation, this borderline new slavery that is the criminal justice system, we deserve it, is what the good thief would say. And the idea is to succeed. You've never seen such devotion. These people are dedicated not to Jesus, but to trying to succeed. They're devoted to trying to get out. Guess them dirty jeans in early teens gave me another gear. Cross You Bear is the next song. That's why the white church unfortunately went along with slavery, segregation, and lynching. And that's true. And this is the most fierce song against Christianity, in particular against I hope the sacrifice mask the vice. I pray every cross you bear is gold. So like the money that comes from being a Christian pastor, the money in the church, I hope that when you have to carry the cross that it's made out of gold. Because what good does that do you? What good does that do you when you're still going to be tortured to death? Religion means nothing. Jesus means nothing. In reality, religion itself is created by and for people so that they can get more money and subjugate others. It's a line I teach in my class. Faith justifies the ambition to dominate. That's just a historical truth. And I'm not saying that's just Christians. That's most religions. Okay? My wife is from the Balkans, and there are like villages, and it would just, like they were controlled by the Ottomans and then the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So, there'd just be people out there, they'd just be farming, and someone would show up, and they'd be like, hey, you're a Christian now. Oh, that guy? No, I don't believe in that. Okay, I'm going to kill you. Oh, no, praise Jesus. Yeah, no, I love it. And then a couple generations go by, and then the Ottomans show up. Hey, you got to be Muslim now. No, I believe in this Jesus guy. We're going to kill you and your family. Yeah, no. Muhammad's great. That's my guy. That's sort of the history of religion. Those tufted... Oh, no, that's a cardinal. I see him up there. He's super pissed that there's no food here. I know you're hungry. Let's see. Can you see him? Fragile Faith, another song that must just be an Hal Green track. Ain't nothing shook about me but my faith. Couple 100 years asking nothing kept us safe. We are in the same place. I love this idea that like he's almost proud of his shook faith, because how can you have faith in a system that puts you in this place? And then he had to be tough. He had to build up this ability to not be shook. Ends with, I've heard many Christians use the N-word. Of course you have. Him and I is this I think sort of a joke here. I think he's talking about a hymn, a church song, and if the church can wait for 350 years, it can wait forever. So like if the injustice can continue forever, then why, if the injustice can last 350 years, why will it not continue forever? For me, hugs from loved ones keep the depression away. I would like to see a happy Ka album. Not because, I don't need him to see, Don't Worry, Be Happy was the #1 jam. Not that. I'm not saying he should always Don't Worry, Be Happy, but every once in a while he'll let out this sort of like little truth, that hugs from loved ones keeps him happy. Like he actually does know what matters in life. It's human connection. It's solidarity with people around you, and anyways. And then the album ends with True Holy Water. I cannot, I can't listen to this song. It's not that it's not good, but there's so many screamings in the back. And the way that I see it, I feel like people are being forced into baptisms because it's true holy water. So I envision people being like drowned and coming up from water and screaming and then being pushed down again. But that's just the space that I'm in this album. Was piss poor, went from Locked in Discord to Keynote. I'm Here for You, Sweat, Bled, and Shed a Tear for You. House Born to Pimp Bars, not sure if these are songs or memoirs. So it's a good song, it's just I can't handle all the screaming. But it ends with this sort of thesis statement. We get the broadcast on the radio, but this is the reward. We're not asking for glory. We're not asking for publicity and fame. This is a sample. We're not asking for publicity and fame, but to see our own boys and girls be able to stay in school and make something good. That, within itself, is enough reward. Yeah, man. Essentially, what he wants is a just society where it is not dog eat dog, where it is not he who has the most will be given more, and he who has the least will be lost. He would like, as far as I can tell, this is just my interpretation, okay, that all three of these people are living in this unjust system. All three of them are going to be tortured to death. One of them is offering to save the other two. One of them is making fun of them, and the other one is worshiping him. But in the end, we need a different model. We need a place where the system that tortures people to death and reinforces inequality, that system is destroyed. Which thief next to Jesus? Yeah, both of them. All right, so there's my interpretation. Thank you for hanging with me and the cardinals and the tufted tit. Is tufted titmice, is that the plural of tufted titmouse? Am I going to get demonetized for saying titmouse? It's a kind of bird, people. Look it up. All right. Anyways, I have to check my baby monitor, see if the 2-year-old is awake. No, she's still sleeping. Nice. All right, I'm going to go make some coffee. There's the camera.